Okay, hi everybody. My name is Lalit Choda, and I'm the founder of the Non-Human Identity Management Group. Firstly, I'd like to thank the WhyNotIAM team for putting on such an amazing event. Great to see so many IAM practitioners here today. I've been speaking to quite a few, like the talent in India is just phenomenal. It's actually great to be back in Bangalore. I was here with my family back in 2011 at Goldman Sachs. So we spent 3 years in Bangalore, made some great friends. This is a great city, great IT talent, and we've just now returned after 10 years. I was going to do a virtual event first, but then after talking with Ravi, decided that we'll come from London and do the talk in person. So as Pooja said, this is probably the hotly debated talk that everybody's looking forward to. So with that, we'll kick off with a short animated video that will explain a little bit about NHIs before I then talk in more detail about the problem.
Are you someone who wants to learn about non-human identities? Non-human identities are a primary attack vector used by hackers and insiders to compromise systems and steal data. A hacker has just logged into your company systems through a phishing sting, stealing an employee's login. They are now looking for non-human identities. I am a non-human identity, and I will explain all about me. What are non-human identities? These are accounts that are used by applications to run on a computer and or connect to other applications, machines, and databases. Why should you be concerned? They are easy to discover. Have access to your critical data. Can be used by humans to compromise your systems and steal your data. So what can we do about the risks? Non-human identities need to be properly managed. Today we don't know how many we have. Are they used or inactive? Are they secure from discovery? What levels of access they have? An organization typically has thousands of these accounts with very weak controls. The non-human identity problem is getting worse. We now have a major secret sprawl problem. Organizations now rely heavily on cloud services. Each cloud integration requires multiple non-human identities. These non-human identities are typically unmanaged and discoverable. Organizations are therefore exposed to supply chain attacks. An average organization typically has over 350 external third-party cloud integrations. Non-human identity data breaches. There have been multiple non-human identity data breaches in the last 12 months. Ticketmaster and Santander's Snowflake cloud databases were compromised. New York Times had their source code stolen. Microsoft were targeted by Midnight Blizzard state hackers. Cloudflare. Hackers exploited unrotated and exposed secrets. Hugging Face. Secrets of 723 organizations were exposed. Breaches involving non-human identities are increasing in frequency. AI systems also use non-human identity accounts. These will be future targets by hackers. The Non-Human Identity Management Group can help. We are a community organization providing a knowledge center on non-human identity challenges and risks. We provide independent guidance and advice, industry-recognized white papers and surveys on non-human identities. We have extensive experience in advising, establishing, and running global non-human identity programs. We share the latest news and developments on non-human identities. This is a major risk faced by every organization and one you cannot ignore. So what are you waiting for? Take action. Now.
Okay, now that video presentation is over, I think you've learned everything about NHIs, and my speech is over. If we can now switch to the presentation. A little bit about me first in terms of background. Let's move to the next slide. I might not look it, but I'm a 30-year veteran in the industry. I've been working mainly in investment banking, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, UBS. Most of my experience for the last 25 years has been in the IAM, PAM, and NHI space. We've built PAM solutions from scratch, IAM solutions from scratch, and I've run a huge number of NHI programs over the last sort of 20 years So I think I know a little bit about NHIs as a sort of a hands-on practitioner, and I'm going to share some of those perspectives here today. I've also sort of founded the NHI management group about 6 months ago because I realized there was a big gap in the industry, in terms of understanding this problem. Where do you go to get guidance and advice? So we created the NHI group on LinkedIn, and we now have a great portal. You've got some nice material that explains that in more detail. People now call me Mr. NHI, and I've now become, I guess, the big influence around the NHI space, trying to evangelize and educate the industry on it. Number of white papers I've written on the topic, and also I provide some advisory services to some of the startups in this space. Okay, let's move on. So I think hopefully most people will understand what non-human identities are. There are different names that people use, non-human, workload identity, machine identity, non-person entities. There's some hot debates on what is the name we should land on, but our group obviously has chosen NHIs. Clearly, NHIs are digital identities or credentials that run, within your IT infrastructure to manage your machines, your software, and then allow sort of authentication between machines and devices, services, databases. And this has kind of been the sort of forgotten problem child, where previously everybody would focus on protecting your barriers, cyber, looking at human, but sort of the non-human side was sort of something that hasn't really been looked at today by many organizations. And this has now become, as sort of Pooja said, I would say probably one of the top 3 issues now on CISO's minds after AI. And there's a huge buzz around NHIs at the moment, sort of in the industry, and I'm glad to be talking to you about this here today. Let's move on. So look, what are the different kinds of NHIs that are out there? Clearly API keys, auth tokens, service accounts, cloud secrets, database technical accounts, certificates. I'm sure you're all very familiar with many of these. Where do they show up? Clearly, pretty much all of our IT infrastructure, whether it's kind of our, machines, our cloud, IoT devices, OT technology, CI/CD pipelines, pretty much any type of process that needs to run in an automated way, uses these non-human identities. Let's move on. Okay, look, in terms of the risks around NHIs, there are many. These are typically very unmanaged accounts, as I mentioned before. We don't know how many we have. There's very weak processes around them from a life cycle standpoint. We don't know who the owners are. These accounts have not been sort of secured properly. And, typically once a hacker comes in, what are they going for? They're going for NHIs. So look, this is a huge, huge risk for organizations, and one that needs a lot of attention. And I think now's the time is right to start looking at this problem, within your organizations. Look, I was going to ask a question, but it's too late now. But in terms of NHIs and how they compare to humans, typically most organizations will have 25 to 50 times the NHIs. I've worked at some global banks where we've been dealing with hundreds of thousands of NHIs, so that just gives you a feel for like the exposure and the sort of magnitude that we need to deal with if you're having to deal with, 50 times the number of humans you have in your company. Now look, what also has kind of really caused this problem to get a lot worse over the last few years has been cloud. Clearly with sort of multi-cloud, microservices, SaaS integrations, this has sort of increased the secret sprawl problem, much, much worse than it was before. Typically it was an internal issue around how do you protect your internal sort of software, but now everything's become so distributed. These secrets are just all over the place. They can be discovered. They're in GitHub repositories. They're not well secured, so hackers can easily get to them and can compromise your systems. And it's not just your own systems. Third-party supply chain attacks are increasing in frequency. So these are things that are very hard to control. Okay, let's move on. Look, so on our portal, we kind of provide great education about, what are the challenges around NHIs. These are some of the top sort of risks. Now, I think the biggest one is plain text, sort of unencrypted credentials in sort of repos, Confluence pages. This is probably, I would recommend, the number one place to start if you want to understand the scale of the problem, is sort of scan and look for these credentials in your repos in particular. Look, we've worked at organizations where we've scanned and found 500,000 plus hard-coded passwords or potential passwords that are in source code repos. So it's a very, very difficult thing to sort of get control over. So, the biggest problem you've got is like, how many accounts do you have? Have you got 100? Have you got 100,000? So, trying to get an inventory of your accounts, again, is one of the most important things you need to do to start looking at this problem and starting to think about the size of the risk that you have. But the challenge is we've got so many endpoints, so many cloud providers, so many different integrations. How do you get an inventory of all your accounts? The other big problem we have is these accounts get created. They're typically static in nature. Clearly, we want to move to a zero trust model, but today they're static secrets, right? And therefore, they've been created. Sometimes we don't know, are they still in use? Who owns them? So you could have, we've seen some organizations where 50, 60% of the NHIs in the organization are stale, unused. So that increases the surface area of risk to your organization in terms of attack. Another big area is humans that are using NHIs. We've talked today about PAM, and the controls there. A lot of people still use like generic accounts we mentioned earlier. These accounts get used all the time. And as you sort of start shutting down sort of human access, just-in-time access through your PAM solutions, what happens is humans, your team members start using the technical accounts or the NHIs to bypass controls because they know the passwords, and then they can just go in rather than using PAM controls. They can bypass all those controls and go straight to your resources. So, most people think about this problem as an external issue, in terms of hackers, but this is also an internal threat issue as well. So you need to think of it from both sides. And typically, when these programs start up, they usually happen because some internal issue occurred where someone connected to production by mistake because they had the same account in use between prod and non-prod. So that's another big issue where credentials get shared across environments. So there's a lack of environment segregation that goes on. And then also you have accounts that get shared across applications. So if you want to secure an account, you want to cycle it, if you don't know who's using your account, you could cause operational impact. So NHIs and getting control of them is probably, I would say, the toughest challenge you're ever going to face in your career. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the market. Like I think as people have said, NHIs, this problem's been around since computers existed. My first experience with NHIs was 25 years ago at a bank. But why has it really peaked now in the last few years? Look, I think all the issues were described around secret sprawl, right, have really put the attention on this problem now. But if you think the market at the moment for NHIs is about 1.2 billion, and it's predicted to go up to 2.4 billion in the next 3 years. So that's a huge, huge opportunity for all you professionals to become NHI experts, and really help start solving these problems for organizations. Look, we've seen in the last 18 months so many startups that have been established trying to solve the NHI problem. We've obviously got Vinay over there. We've got Permiso here today and others, Observe, that are all trying to tackle part of this problem. And we've seen a huge amount of investment from venture capitalists, nearly 300 million investment just this year alone. So you can see the focus that's getting put on this in the industry. Look, I think 25 is going to be a huge year for the NHI space. I think everybody's now talking about it, but I think companies are now starting to invest, into their 2025 year program and starting to looking at this problem. And I think for all of you that are IAM experts here, look, I think this should be a new area that you should spend some time to learn about. You can come to our portal, really get educated, because this is going to be a huge growth area for the industry. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about our group. So I formed the NHI management group about 6 months ago. Why did I do that? There was really a lack of education and understanding, and nowhere where this, was being discussed, a little bit like the WhyNotIAM group that's been set up as well. Our goal was to create a community, to drive collaboration, share best practices. So we created our LinkedIn group. We've now got 1,350 members, growing very, very fast. There's lots of great content there that's posted by myself, other practitioners in the industry. So I think you've all got some pamphlets. Please join the NHI group, and you can learn a lot about what's going on in the industry. We've had huge number of activity and posts. And then to complement the LinkedIn group, we created a portal. And sort of our goal, or my goal, was to really help educate the industry. So we've published white papers, we have research, we have guides on how to solve the problem, how to approach solving the problem, great, blogs, and a great resource of information. We also help provide guidance on the products that are out in the industry, like White Swan, help sort of educate customers on, where to go, how do you learn about the problem, and what are some of the solutions that can help address your NHI risks. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so what's our mission statement? Our mission statement is basically to help organizations. My goal is to evangelize and educate the industry through what we do on social media and all the content we publish on LinkedIn and through our portal. We're wanting to drive collaboration across the industry. Look, this is still a maturing space. There's a lot of different solutions or approaches that are out there. Look, I think if you're starting your journey, you really need to start focusing first on getting that inventory, getting control of your existing exposure, your static secrets, scan your code, secure them in a vault, and the standard things just to get under control. But then, as an industry, they're moving to sort of the zero trust model. There are sort of standards like Spire, Whimsy that are sort of coming to the forefront, and some solutions are helping sort of solve things in a more of a zero trust sort of way, and just-in-time sort of privilege granting. So look, there's a huge amount that's going on in the industry. The other thing that our group does is we provide independent guidance and advice, given our sort of 25 years plus experience running, establishing these programs. Our niche is really to provide guidance to organizations so you can learn about how to start tackling the problem. As I said, look, a little bit like zero trust, the NHI problem can't be solved, in a year or 2 years. This is typically a 3 to 5 year journey. We've run programs that are 20 million plus at some big banks. So this is a huge, huge investment that you need to make. But what we can do is we can guide you, we can give you a practitioner's sort of approach to how to tackle the problem and how do you take a risk-based approach, going after your highest risk first and tackle the problem that way. Okay, I think that's it. Let's just go to the last slide. This is where you can find us on our portal, join our LinkedIn group, and also subscribe to our newsletter.